Hey guys, today we're going to practice proving that triangles are congruent, and then we're going to prove that parts of triangles are congruent by using CPCTC. Okay, so I'm going to start off on our notes from example number 2. Put down your given, and then you're going to start marking up your picture. So I put my right angles there. D is the midpoint of RS, so that tells me that these two segments are congruent. So that's what I'm going to put next. RD is congruent to SD, because it says the word midpoint here, so that's how I know I'm going to use definition of midpoint. Next step. Well, just like number 1, I noticed that right here, this side AB, it's kind of overlapping itself. Same situation in example number 2. Side TD is congruent to TD itself. Anytime something's congruent to itself, that's called reflexive. Now if I look at my triangles, I have SAS, so they are congruent. Okay. Moving on to example number 3, it's a little bit different because now we're not trying to prove that just the triangles are congruent. Notice how it's asking us to prove that sides of the triangles are congruent. That's a huge hint. I know I'm going to have to use CPCTC because they're corresponding parts. Okay, so go ahead and list your given. If you have to, then you can redraw the triangles out separately. Angles A and B are congruent, and then AC, that's this whole side, is congruent to BC. There. Okay, well, same type of idea as 1 and 2, but this time it's with an angle. This angle C is kind of overlapping itself in both the triangles, and it's in the same position, so this is reflexive but with an angle. Okay, so I'm going to put angle C is congruent to angle C because reflexive. And now I have an angle, a side, and an angle, and that side is in between those two angles, so ASA. It's important when you make your triangle congruency statement that you put the letters in the correct order because it's not providing you with that anymore. So I'm going to do ACE. A corresponds with B, so I'm going to put B first. C corresponds with C, and E corresponds with D. So I've proved the triangles are congruent by ASA. Now the whole purpose of this is to try and prove that the parts of this triangle are congruent. Well, if the triangles are congruent, then all their corresponding parts are congruent. So my next step is to state that those sides are indeed congruent by corresponding parts of congruent triangles also have to be congruent. Now you don't have to write out all the words in a proof, but you do need to know what these letters stand for, and you should be able to explain it. Okay? Number 4 is very similar. If I look at the statement it's asking me to prove, I'm trying to prove that two angles of this triangle are congruent. So again, I need to use CPCTC. Start off by proving that the triangles themselves are congruent. I liked to draw the triangles out separately because it's a little confusing the way that they look now. And then I'm going to say AC and BD are congruent. AD and BC are congruent. Well, both these triangles have AB, and in the original diagram, AB is being overlapped. That's called reflexive again. So now if I look at the small diagrams that I drew off to the side, it's very clear to see that we have SSS. Now, when you're writing your congruency statement, choose whatever you'd like for the first one, but you have to make sure that the corresponding parts match up. So in this triangle, A corresponds with angle B. That means B corresponds with angle A, and C corresponds with D. Now I can finish the proof, because if the triangles are congruent, then each corresponding part of those triangles would also be congruent. CPCTC. Okay, go ahead, flip to the back. That will be the rest of our notes, and I'll help you out with those. Alright, number 5 has some new terminology. In the given, we've never seen this before. So angle S and angle V are right angles. We know what that means. Go ahead and put the little right angle marks. We still need to say that those angles are congruent. So I'm going to say angle S is congruent to angle V because all right angles are congruent. It's a little shorthand that you could use. Okay. T is the midpoint of SV. That tells me that ST and TV are congruent because definition of a midpoint. And then I need something else. I only have 2 pieces of information. Well, we have this little bow tie shape and these lines form an X. So that tells me vertical angles. I'm going to name them 1 and 2. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because vertical angles are congruent. Alright. Well, let's just go back and see what we were asked to prove to begin with. We're just trying to prove that the triangles are congruent. So I don't need to use CPCTC. I just use one of the regular triangle shortcuts that we learned. And in this case, it would be ASA. Done. See if you can try number 6. It's really similar. We have perpendicular lines, we have a midpoint, and we're trying to prove that parts of the triangles are congruent. That means we have to use CPCTC in example number 6. And then I'll catch up to you on number 7. Okay, so we're going to read the given. Gives us a bunch of information. Take a second and look at what we're trying to prove. We're trying to prove that angles are congruent, so I know I need to use CPCTC. So my first plan of attack is to figure out a way to prove that the triangles are congruent, and then figure out a way to prove that the parts of the triangles are congruent. So in this case, the 2 triangles that I'm trying to find, triangle ABC and ADC. Those are the 2 triangles that I need to prove are congruent. Okay, here we go. Angles 1 and 2 are congruent by the given, and angles 4 and 5 are also congruent by the given statement. Okay, what else can I see? Well, 3 and 1 kind of look like vertical angles because these 2 lines intersect to form 2 angles. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 because vertical angles are congruent. Alright, well, before we said that 1 was congruent to 2, and if 1's the same as 3 as well, that means 2 and 3 have to be the same by substitution. Alright, I got 2 sets of angles now. I have 4 and 5 are congruent and 2 and 3 are congruent. Well, this one is just like those questions on the front page. I have an overlapping side that's reflexive. Alright, now I've got enough information. Now I have ASA. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ADC. If the triangles are congruent, then their corresponding parts are congruent. By CPCTC. Done. Question number 8 I'm going to hold off on. You can watch some like that in the next video because we're going to spend another day proving lines are parallel. Okay? So this concludes what we're going to do with CPCTC for now. Take a look at the next few videos. That will help you study for the quiz and for the midterm. Hope this helped.